Hello, everyone, especially to our esteemed guests and valuable audience members. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you as you are here today in our panel discussion. Through this panel discussion, we embark on a thought provoking journey into the realms of gender and identity. We are honored to have such a diverse and distinguished panels of experts and speakers who bring a wealth of insights and experiences to our theme. As the theme of our today's lecture is gender, politics and party loyalty. In today's discussion, we aims to focus into the complex and critical aspects of gender and identity, exploring the intersections that shape our understanding of self and society. Your presence here underscored the importance of open dialogue, empathy, and inclusivity as we navigate through topics that touch the very core of our human experience. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for being a part of this important panel discussion. Let's embrace this richness of our diversity and explore the academic world of gender and identity together. Now, I would like to welcome our expert speaker for today's panel discussion, Dr. Sadaf Khalid. If she is really a very good academician and scholar. If I talk about her, then she is a born and brought up in Kolkata, West Bengal. She did her BA in political science, MA and PhD in public administration from Aligarh Muslim University. She is also a university gold medalist for her master program, and she has also qualified UGC NET program, which is quite a prestigious exam in India. Her core interests are public policy and governance, international relations, Western political philosophy. In fact, she has more than 3 years of university teaching and research experience. So we can see like she is a good teacher and researcher also. She has more than 10 research papers in Scopus Index Journal and also has chapter published in various edited books. She is an ardent writer and columnist in the online newspaper platform, The Eastern Herald, and regularly write articles on national and international importance have more than 10 published articles. She has recently been interviewed by eatmynews.com for her young academic career. Sadaf recently has been awarded a scholarship Right to Change the World workshop under Open Act project, sponsored and funded by the universities like Stanford, Oxford, and Brown University, etc. Currently, she is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science in the School of Liberal and Arts Humanities, Ilam, Greater Noida, India. Thank you. And along with Dr. Sadaf as a guest speaker, we have Soumyadeep as a panelist in our today's panel discussion. So we welcome all of you and we are starting our panel discussion. So firstly, I would like to invite Dr. Sadaf to share her views on our theme.
First of all, thanks to the team and also Minakshi ma'am for briefly introducing me in the session. Also, IAPSS that aims at enhancing and giving support to not just the political science students, but bringing such kind of uh, uh, discussions on online platforms where people can join and enlighten themselves and also the IAPSS creates a platform where researchers, scholars, teachers can join and discuss, connect with each other. So, thank you so much for calling me here for giving a lecture on identity and gender. And since it's my interest, as ma'am has already briefly introduced, that my core areas lies with political philosophy and governance and identity politics. So one of my paper which I think has actually brought her interest is the making and mocking, the subjugation and suppression of minorities, is the paper which is published under Scopus. And that was a collaborative work with four of my other authors. And yes, I want to bring insights, not just about that paper we'll be particularly talking about. I'll be talking about a lot of things. So before starting my lecture, I know a lot of us already have this confusion that we have is, uh, do or is there any connection between sex or gender, or is it the same thing, or is it because a lot of people while filling up the forms also that we do, we sometimes it's written sex, sometimes in forms they are written gender, and lot of people as laymen, I'm not talking about we as scholars and teachers, we are aware that there is a distinction, but on commonality, on common grounds, people tend to mix these two terms. So first I want to be very clear in this, that gender is something which is culturally defined. Gender is a social construct, we have constructed it, we give roles, there are attributes, characteristics given to male, female, responsibilities, and that's how entitlements together given to male or female brings up gender. Sex is completely something which is biological. You have what? You have hormonal changes between male and female, reproductive changes, organs, that differentiates between the male and the female, the chromosomes, etc. All these are normal attributes that gives us insights into what actually sex is and what actually gender is, but we are here specifically to talk about gender, right? And today we all, I'm sure most of the people who have joined the session must be agreeing that sex no more is the main issue in anywhere across globe. Right now I think gender is something which remains to be very important aspects in all domains, be it gender and psychology, be it gender and politics, be it gender and education. So there are a number of things that we can relate with, and that's how identity has a very greater role to play along with gender in politics, right? So we'll be talking in that sense only. Also, if anyone who has a question can drop that in the chat box and I'll be taking up later on. So we have already discussed what sex and gender is, right? Now there are three aspects that we have to look into when we are talking about gender. I will not quickly come to identity or politics or would directly relate it. First, we need to know the concepts, the approaches of looking into gender, and then we can actually relate it with politics or relate it with identity. So, there's one aspect which is very, very important and can be taken as a methodology as well. That is how gender can be analyzed, right? So it's a methodology, there are methods involved in analyzing the gender of a particular male or female, right? So what we can do is collectively, including language, including culture, including religion, lot of aspects are there involved, particularly in a certain environment, and ranging from households to the firm to the organization to the large scale community you are a part of, any ethnic group, nation, country, that that collectivization and then doing analysis of that sex aggregates the gender, and that can be done separately, qualitatively, quantitatively. That is how a researcher talks about when it comes on to gender analysis, right? Then we have to look into the world gender ratio. Now, I'll be factual. When I'm talking about gender in this particular section, it's world gender ratio that we need to talk about. So, this is factual. Like uh, out of 236 countries, regions estimating by the United Nations and organizations that do this calculations, females outnumber males in 152 countries. Means out of 236 countries, 152 countries or regions, female outnumber males, right? And if you look at the actual data, now I have a folder with me in which I have everything related to the PPT that I prepared today and everything. I'll be sharing in the end with Minakshi ma'am, and she can share the link with all the participants so that they can get insights. And also, there are video links that we can that will help or give you insights about everything that I'm talking about today. So you see, Russian Federation has 10.22 million women's more females than males, followed by Brazil, United States of America, and Japan. In terms of, it ranges from 4 million to 3 million onwards, right? And there are 15 countries where female population is more than male population. So there's this complete report given by United Nations. And on the other hand, you see, males outnumber females in 84 countries. And India has 45 million more males, followed by China, having 27 million more males than females. And in 10 countries, the male population exceeds the female population. That's how the number goes. And it is to give you a brief idea as to why gender for us, why we talk about female empowerment, or women empowerment, why we talk about transgenders, why we don't understand homosexuality, and if we understands it, we don't accept it culturally. What is that? So that quantitative analysis is also very, very important, because that also creates an identity. Again, gender obviously is has a synergy with identity, right? So if you look at the global gender gap, obviously, according to the data 2022, economic participation, the global gender gap index, you see. So economic participation of India, if you see, was 143. Educational attainment was, these are all in terms of among what is the ranking of India among 146 countries. So India, in terms of economic participations and opportunities given to women, we come under 143. Educational attainment of females, in terms of 146, we come under 107. And health and survival, 146. And political participation, again, politics, very, very important, we come under 48 number, right? So we have to look into that dimension also. Also, there are states where we see number of women per 1,000 men in our country, and Kerala outperforms. I also have this data with me in my PPT, and we can share that understanding later on. So now, one aspect is clear in front of us, that females obviously is lesser in number in terms of 1,000 per men in the country. There are only few states where we see there is an exceed in the number. Otherwise, the number is less. Right. So when the number is less, obviously female plus marginalized coming under the minority in number, then being marginalized from a very long time, suppression, subjugation, a lot of things plays a very important role. And that's how the identity of a woman is created, including the numbers as well. We have to see, as I told you, one important aspect is gender analysis, right? So sex has to do with biology, while gender has to do with social construct, culture. Now, once the gender analysis is done, we have to focus on gender assessment. Assessment can be done in two different aspects. The roles that you give to women, obviously in political sphere, in workspace, household, what is their role when compared to that of men? And that's how the identity is created. That's how the synergy is built up, right? And the second is, how will that be anticipated? How will that be taken? That work will be taken by women or men differently, and how you obviously pay them, not just paying them, but paying them not just in terms of money, but paying attention, the kind of promotion that you give to women, what preferences in terms of activities that you do. There was this one very interesting research which was done by Ohio University. I'm sure a lot of us are aware of. It's in US, and they are involved in a lot of interesting researches that they do. So there was this published paper. When I was actually preparing my PPT, I was going through that, and what what very interesting fact was shared, and I'm sure all of us must be agreeing to that, especially the people who come from corporate. There was this statement given that lot of, you know, petty paperwork, paper creative work, file keeping activities, such as a lot of those small petty tasks in corporates and in organizations are mostly done by female, not by men. You know, also creativity. We are seeing that females are very creative than that of male. Right. So all lot of I'm not saying administrative paperworks, but I'm saying those petty works that you think will take time. Right. You don't certainly give those works to men. Why? Because you already have a prejudiced mind that that will certainly that can be done better by women than that of men. Why? Because you think that that role is better for a female to do, right? And you don't find male as to be, it's not efficient enough that you don't find them, but you want the females to do that rather than male. So there's this stereotyping of lot of roles given to women in certain places. Also, there are concepts which are very important when I'm talking about gender. It's very important to enlighten to the audience about what gender equity and equality is. Right? So, a lot of us, what we do is equity and equality is the same thing, but it's not the same thing at all. So, equity is a kind of fairness. This equity is not there when we talk about gender. To an extent, what we do is equality must be attained, equal pay for equal work. Okay, that can happen in certain organizations, in certain corporates. What happens is, if a female is a manager and a male also is at the same position, to an extent that equality is concept of equality is there, because the company has a vision of paying the women as to be the same that you pay to the male. Fine, but is there fairness involved in the concept? Do you actually consider the women as to be or coming from the advantage class? No, you always consider the women to come from a disadvantaged class. Historically, socially, is your mind ready to accept and give that fairness to that women? That fairness is equity, which is not there. Equality can be there, but equity is missing, and that is what we don't understand. We are more focusing on equality all the time, talking about equal pay for equal work. Fine, to an extent we can uh, a- achieve it, but fairness, the concept of gender equity, is obviously very very important at the same time. And that is how, a lot of psyche building work needs to be done. Gender integration, gender mainstreaming. Again, integration is very very important. Are we trying, is our approach depends upon integration of women in a particular place? Can we do that? Do we actually think about formulating a policy, implementation, evaluation, till the feedback that we get? Are we involving this program assessment, women based program assessment, in certain any policy, be it public, private? Are we actually doing that? So that gender integration throughout the process. Say, suppose you have asked a woman to formulate a policy. Why? Because you feel that, okay, if you are your targeting audience is women, women must better understand what are the problems that are faced by a woman. uh, so obviously we'll think that I'll be a better person to understand that, okay, this is the rural area and what problems do I face. I will be the better person to understand that, so I'm formulating a policy. Fine. Am I the same person who is involved in the implementation process? Somebody who is from the same sex, same gender, involved in that process, somebody who is evaluating the report, that person, uh, does that person has the same psyche, or does that person belongs to the same gender, or same sex during the evaluation process? also the feedback, evaluation of the feedback. So gender integration basically involves, it's a kind of a norm where you have to encircle from the formulation till the feedback. That particular design, that particular assessment has to be there. Then you can say that yes, a fair results. We have got a fair results out of that. So we miss the gender integration part most of the time, and that's how, the identity and the females' involvement in politics, political participation, etc. A lot of places we tend to see that how people who start are not the person who ends it, and how you start certainly is not the same what you get in the end, right? So sometimes the things goes upside down, the results also sometimes changes, right? So we have to look for gender integration, also gender mainstreaming. We have to have policies, strategies that are focusing on that are gender centric in nature. We have to do that. There has to be functions or strategies designed in such a way that we are focusing on gender, and it is incorporating everything, the equality, the equity part, fairness, lot of things. Empowerment has to be there, numbers are there, qualitative understanding, quantitative understanding, and we don't focus on such things. What we do is we just plan haphazardly. Okay, fine, this is the number, and we have to look into these things, and we appoint somebody who is not even a woman, and they are addressing the problems of a certain area where you have more females than that of male, and then again you are appointing a male person to look into the matter, right? That's how it is done. Also gender stereotyping, our own personal biasness, stereotyping, we gender stereotyping obviously has a very strong relationship, or what we understand is masculinity and femininity, what men and women of all generations should be like, right? So we don't value the softness of, we don't value, we sometimes don't even accept that there is a softness within the male also, right? The male has to be strong. Lot of advertisement you see in the television today that says ki kaun kehta hai mard ko dard nahi hota, right? Mard ko dard hota hai, and that we have to acknowledge, right? And sometimes, we never see an advertisement where a female is driving a truck or is appointed as very recent. I think Zomato or Swiggy started this advertisement where they have female delivery girls. We always have attached this word, again identity plays a very important role. Delivery boy is always there, there is not a delivery girl. Some such sort of works, that is the role, that is the responsibility which is attached to gender, and that's how we stereotype that this work can be done by this person. Girls are obedient, girls are cute, girls can cry, boys can don't, blue belongs to boys, and that's how I have decided to wear a denim and a blue to show that that is not just meant for male, it's meant for female also. I can also like blue, right? So that's how, boys are good in mathematics, girls are not. Girls are more suited into nursing jobs, more suited into hospitality jobs. Boys cannot do that. Boys are not better in that, right? But if you see, though we as females are always look up for household works and especially cooking, but most of the loveliest chefs across the globe are male, right? So that's how the concept of stereotyping goes. Then gender based violence, very important. Roles, according to the roles, responsibility, violence has a very important, I we were taught human rights for 4 years, 5 years in fact, throughout 3 years of bachelor's and then master's. So it was a compulsory paper which was taught to us, because political science remains to be the mother discipline, and within that we have public administration and human rights, that's to be the branches of it, right? So this violence has got very important role to play with gender, right? That's how you see a women seen as an object, physically, sexually, psychologically, how you harm a person, right? Including intimidation, suffering, coercion, deprivation, suppression, how much liberty you give to a woman, and who are you to give that liberty to a woman. Lot of questions arises, and we generally avoid such things. And when we start avoiding such things, violence comes into play. And violence certainly does not only means physical violence, it can be a mental violence as well, right? And we don't acknowledge that. Also, gender involves two very, very important concepts, that is, whether as a person you are homophobic or you believe in heterosexism. Very important, because gender is not my core area, but my interest lies in gender. So I want to know a lot of things, because as I told you, a lot of things are associated, lot of domains are associated with gender, and it has a very, very important role. So whether you are homophobic people, or people who are homophobia, feels very uh, they are mostly there is a feeling of irrational fear involved within them. There's this feeling of discrimination against the homosexual people, right? You don't accept their human behavior, you only accept heterosexual behavior in the society. And that's how heterosexism plays into role, whether you as a person believes in heterosexual or heterosexism, or you believe in homo sexism, right? And you tend to discriminate people on the basis of that, and again violence comes into play. Now, mostly all the problems, all the concepts that we have discussed, what we have realized is there has to be an upliftment, or there has to be a transformation which is required in the society at a common parlance, or at a local level, you can say. We need to have that transformation, and deciding about not what roles we must give to people in terms of male or female, what roles and responsibilities you are assigning. You don't assign them the roles and responsibilities. Let the people figure it out on their own, what roles and responsibilities they must take. And you must not stop them in opting that. That is going to bring the change and transformation on the socio political and socio economic level, right? Very important. Also, at a very young age, you have to understand the sexual orientation of a particular person, male or female, right? Romantically or irromantically, what is your attraction? What's your sexual identity, is your sexual behavior, your sexual desires. And also, again, you are not going to, as parents, as doctors, as psychologists, as teachers, as relatives, not going to press or suppress their identity, gender identity from them. Don't suppress that, right? And on a very I'll discuss this in a very short sense of this term which is called as transgender. It encompasses a very diverse array of gender identities and expressions. Obviously, this falls somewhere between a male and a female, right? That is, and but not just falls between the male and the female, it's also about the sexual orientation that a person has, right? So it must not be considered as a taboo in the society. That trans word involves, and it means diverse sexual orientation that a person has, right? in terms of not just a socially constructed idea I'm talking about the variations, biological variations that a person has, the sex characteristics that a person has, right? What your body physiologically allows you to do, that biologically allows you to do that, right? And we tend to neglect all these aspects which are very important to understand gender first, and then attach this identity part to it. So identity, if you see throughout social sciences, humanities, it is described as a phenomena, as a diverse multiculturalism phenomena which is there, attached to identity. Lot of social movements, you see civil rights movements, liberties, fight for freedom and for language, for culture, religion. There is a very important role of identity involved into it. Ethnicity, violence based on ethnicity, uh, conflicts in terms of nations, feeling of nationalism, again, who is a nationalist, who is a non-nationalist person. So all these, are the major concepts which are connected to gender and identity. So the seeds lies as genders, and that gender comes out as flowers, comes out as branches, and it's as fruits or leaves, you can say, in various identities that a person has. But seeds, the roots are the gender thing only, right? So there are a lot of you can say works on identity and gender. So if you look at there's one very important thinker called as Brubaker and Cooper in 2000. They actually attached all the civil liberties, civil movements. They compiled a paper. I'll share that with my audience. They compiled a paper in which they talked about various important protests and movements that happen, where not just female but males also were involved to fight for female empowerment, right? So there, this sociological analysis of relationship between these movements, identity and politics, is very beautifully written in the paper. And also females from different culture, different background was a part of it. So very recent example of it in our country would be the CA NRC protest that happened and was done by the Shaheen Bagh women, if I'm not wrong. Please correct me, somebody, if I'm not wrong. I think this happened in 2019, right? And that also, if you look at the idea, women from various parts of the country, in their own area, in their own community, it was not just it was led by the marginalized Muslim women's, started by, but it was led by a lot of women who were not Muslims. They were Christians, they were Sikhs who joins the movement, obviously the Hindu women, upper caste, lower caste. It was very it was a diverse movement which they would not have even thought of that it will become such a great movement, that now a lot of people would write papers on that, or a book also. I think two or three books are actually published by authors on this protest. So very recent would be how gender, culture, religion aspect, nation aspect, as well as gender aspect, civil movement. One very recent would be the CAA and RC protest, right? Now, focusing on the discussion, we have to understand that political claims about identity, about politics, lies in both the ways, theoretical as well as practical. We have to understand the expressions, the experiences, culture, everything in both the ways, theoretically plus practically. What we understand theoretically is completely very, very different from what we see in practicality, and we tend to ignore that. So our focus must be in realizing, and that is why I mentioned these papers. I took these papers as examples and review them for my own study also, because what you see on grounds is completely very different when you read these books and papers. So you have to be investigative, be intriguing when you're writing such papers. Also, there are a lot of approaches to understand identity, politics, and gender. So one very important um, aspect would be the Marxist or the neo-Marxist approach. Uh, Now, generally, I don't mention it, and I have not even mentioned that in my paper, because my paper certainly lies uh, on cultural grounds, on sociological grounds. But we have to understand gender, building an identity of a person, be it male or female, has has a very strong relationship with that of class that we see on the sociological grounds. The oppressed class and the oppressors means the suppressed class and the suppressors, right? That's how inequality in the society prevails. We don't understand it. I think somebody has unmuted. Okay, shall I go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we need to understand that there are two things which are very very important. I am just talking in I don't want to go it explicitly. I'll take the implicit part. But theory of power plays a very important role when it comes on to identity and gender. First, right? Second, uh, again, gender, right? How gender primarily contributes, whether the gender primarily is contributing for a social change or not, or vice versa. You want to bring social change by uplifting the marginalized or the suppressed gender in your own country. So that has a very strong relationship with the class, right? Sometimes you see, if you look at all the writers, literary writers, ancient literary writers, especially the feminist writers of their time, they were all elite class women. And most of the works that they have given, they have all talked about how suppressed they are in their own societies, despite of being rich, despite of having a, 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 a colossal kind of libraries that they can have. They are going to Oxford, they are going to Stanford, they are going to many, they have degrees in BA in English literature from such reputed universities where marginalized section cannot even think of going there. But even then also, sociologically, on social grounds, based on their identities, they are suppressed, right? And that's how they given their own literature, right? Sewell in 1992 is a thinker actually, and a author also, and has a very important contribution in identity. He said that this social structure is thought of a hard or a material sort of thing, which is very difficult to alter, right? Gender is very difficult, or stereotyping of gender is very hard. It's just like a hardest material, which is very difficult to convert it, to melt it, right? But class is difficult, hard as material to convert. But culturally, things are very soft. That what we in international relation calls it as culture as soft power to dominate people, right? To change their mentality. So culture can play a very important role to uplift the women or give a different picture. If I'm not wrong, um, in either of these hills, Garo Khasi Jayanti, I'm not sure, but it's from this. It's in Assam. There's this tribe in Assam where after marrying, the female does not go to the male's house. It is the male who come back at the female place and stay, right? Many of my Assami friends tell me that there's this tribe who follows this kind of culture there. So there, the damad or the in-laws do not treat this person as ghar jamai. Matlab, it's not like a taboo that they say. In North, it's more considered like a slang. कि आपने किसी को ऐसे बोल दिया कि वो तो घर जमाई, that person is a घर जमाई over here, and it's considered as a taboo sort of thing. It hits hard onto male ego when they hear that. But in Assam, it's quite like it's a very welcoming approach where the female does not have to leave their place. The male has to come to the female's house, right? I'm sure that this is, I am not talking in an ideal as an idealist person, but there are examples that you need to know that how you can socially and culturally create changes, right? And create genders, or create changes in gender based role, right? So, identity is based on sociological grounds, economic status, very, very important. We have to understand this, and again, it has a very important role in politics. Social structure, how is it, how you are being welcoming into politics or not, very, very important. So, identity politics as cultural politics, very, very important. Students section within the university, how you are socially enlightening them, how you are making them ready to be as the coming generation or the youth is very, very important, right? And you see most of the students today are very rebellious, and throughout in the history we have seen most of the civil rights events are or civil rights movements are led by the students only, right? So culture in the university is also very, very important, that builds up your identity. What is your identity? What social inclinations you have, right? Civil rights and women movements, mostly you will never see that the movements mostly come from the rural region. Why? Because the women obviously are suppressed more in the rural areas. These women who stay in the urban areas, though in the like in the due process of that movement, you will see the rural women's also joining these urban women's. But you see most of the civil rights movement led by women have or is initiated by the urban class only, most of it, because they are all enlightened women, right? They are aware of their identities and rights, and that's how they led those movements. So 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, lot of civil right movement, gender based movement happened, not just in India, in we experienced that later, post 1990. But before that, across Europe, across US, we have seen that these movements have been led by gender based led movements have been frequently seen, right? Also, you see Kaufman, very, very important thinker in gender, has associated these civil rights movements, these women movements, to be an important expression to bring a change in the society. He said that these movements act as affirmations for us to fundamentally focus on the gender part. Until and unless any such movement is led in the country, nobody wakes up. This is what he sees. And politically also, nobody focuses much on the gender part. So that is very, very important. Also, that brings a kind of strong emotional intelligence, and interpersonal skills are, um, you can say, it's more developed in females lifestyle. It is more taken up again as a culture for them, and they keeps on following that. So one woman again has to uh, back the other woman, and that's how it is, the process is done. When you see a lot of when you are alone in the queue, you feel that it is just you who is facing this problem. But once, this is what Kaufman said, that once you see that you are not the only one who's facing it, there are a lot more in the same queue. So when you are a part of these movements, these civil rights movements, you feel that the problem is bigger. and there are a lot in number who faces it. So it's the policy makers who look into the action, the survivors who are the victims who are facing it, the survivors who have already faced that and now they have come, everything comes into in front of the society. Something which is hidden also comes. The manifestation of such things are there in the society with these led movements, right? So we have to accept it, and recognition is very very important to such cultural differences and problems in distinct groups related to identities is very very important, right? One very important, and before discussing the very important part from my paper, one last part which I want to discuss is identity groups mostly you will find keeps on advocating for recognition. All these fights, all these movements, all these gender led movements you see, uh, what is the reason behind doing that? Are they like running after because they want more money? No. Because they want big houses? No. That is not the thing. Do they want, you know, um, um, some kind of personal attention from somebody, or is it a popularity stunt or something like? No, that is not the case. The case is innate recognition skills, which you recognition, longing for this recognition is always there, and you'll find it in each identity groups, whether related to any institution, political institution, economic institution, or not related to it. The reason behind that is recognition, advocating for recognition, for and that recognition is respect, which I'm talking about, right? Since you culturally you're different, religiously you're different, your identity is different in terms of whatever you eat, whatever you wear, whatever is your physical appearance, you are not being respected with the differences that you have. So they assume, a lot of writers also assume, a lot of research papers which I have reviewed for my work also, lot of them have suggested that it is this recognition part which is involved, and people mostly coming from different identity groups want respect for their own culture, for their own language, and gender, language, identity, politics, all this is very very important, right? One very important thinker in 1995 said, Brown, he argues that marginalization, you know forms the basis for culture of identity groups. Brown, as a female thinker, she contends that lot of people who come from the marginalized class, they don't they don't long for money. They are not doing it for money. They are doing it for respect. They are advocating for their rights because they want respect. They come from a marginalized cultural identity, which is not valued by not just the country people, but the people who are running the country also, right? The dominant group, right? And the dominant group always control the state, right? The state you are a part of, state obviously in terms of governance, government that you have, right? So they want respect from them, and you will see little bit of, the very profound example would be talking about the tribals in our own country, talking about northeastern states in our own country. Thoda sa you give importance to them, the little importance you give to them, they are so they are so big hearted people, they welcome it so well. The indigenous tribes that we have within our country, and that's how a lot of people supports reservations for them. Why do you give reservations to them? Because you want to socially protect them from the society. You feel that socially and culturally they are backward. That is why you're giving that reservation to them. And the more love you give to them, 200 times back the love they give back to you. You'll feel that. And why? Because they were longing for that respect. They don't want your money, they want your attention, right? So, a very interesting work I came across while reviewing for this lecture was Gitlin. Gitlin is the a writer and author also. He's a researcher. And he said that language also plays a very important role when we talk about gender and politics, right? So identity, politics, and language, very, very important. What language you used for people, you use for that community, use for that ethnic group, you use for females, for male, right? And that's how the politics, culture of politics is created in your own country. Feher, Sprajan, all of these are very important thinkers. When I was doing my review work, it was very difficult for me to, even remember these names. I could not even pronounce them rightly. That is why I've written it, so that while sharing with all of you and their works, it gets easy for you also. So these are all foreign writers. None of them are the Indian writers. And we feel that the problem of gender identity and politics is bigger in our country, though it is, no doubt. But you see, when you read papers across the globe, the problems that you see, it's even more complex. Their papers, when you read their papers, when you read their works, you'll figure it out that हमारा problem तो कुछ भी नहीं है. At times you feel कि this is not very big. They are dealing with something which is even very difficult to even bear it, right? So Sprajan and Fear, way back in the 90s, they given their paper as to how this language translation, etc., are very dangerous when we talk about any group, right? That's how the concept of racism, race, all these come into great play. Young, Kimlicka, all these are the writers who have illustrated and admitted the fact that socially constructed nature of groups, differences, these do not preclude the or organize concepts which I have already discussed. uh, they have also supported that there are various aspects that we need to focus on while we are talking about gender identity and politics. And it is also Young, way back in the 19th century, and Kimlicka, they said that history of a particular country also uh, builds the identity of any group, right? And from a very long time, that identity of that particular community is there in the country. It is very difficult, again going back to the thinker that I discussed, that he says that class or social structure is as hard as a material which is very difficult to convert, right? So this is how they say that history sometimes, if you look at the history, the suppression of women, we still see the forms of suppression, right? Only the forms of suppression have changed, but the suppression remains there, right? So that is how they said that a socially equal uh, society needs to be created. Also, gender equity concept has to be there. Fairness in the attitude has to be there, right? That is what I wanted to discuss today. And the last part would be obviously my own paper, which I would like to discuss with all of my you know mentioned people over here. So this is something which is very, very important. This paper I wrote, Making and Mocking the Subjugation and Suppression of Marginalized and the Politics Identity, way back in 2019, if I am not wrong, is sorry, 2020, right? And we it took around 1 year for the journal to accept it. And when it got accepted, it was not Scopus Index, it was a Web of Science Index journal. And then later on, it was index under Scopus, because of the quality that we discussed. So various aspects we discussed in that paper, how minority identity is created in one country, and because of the growing conservational attitude, or internationalization? What is the discourse about minority in the country, not just in India but in the South Asian? We discussed that is how the paper was openly accepted by the journal, because it was not in terms of only India, but in terms of South Asian region, right? So identity, obviously, how a suppressed or subjugated identity looks like, not just again in the neo-Marxist perspective in the class struggle, but also sociologically how we deals with it. And that's how, language, we discussed what language we use for females, what elements of translated versions of languages, when it is done, what are the discrepancies that are involved, writings on a daily newspaper, advertisements that we see on a daily basis, right? All these are discussed in my paper, whereas I'll be discussing it as well. And also the secular attitude, hyper consumerism, right? How these play a very important role in the new Indian identity, right? Do Are we moving towards a secular attitude? uh, Tech populism, obviously this concept of populism through technology is spreading at a very rapid pace. Hyper consumeristic attitude of the Indians today is also an identity change that we see in the society, and now it is being constructed socially, right? Movements, again in my paper we have discussed certain movements also with that. And in the end, obviously, yes, post CA and RC, women political awakening, marginalized women political awakening, also the repercussions of this movement is also discussed. And the last part obviously is how we need to address such de-socialization, or we have to see how we can accelerate women empowerment more when we are talking in terms of policies that we have in our country, right? So we talked about many other policies that we have reviewed in other countries going on, right? And now these all together, uh, f- the platform is open for discussion and conclusion as to how we in the recent times have seen changes in the attitudes and identities of the people. And that's how the paper is transcribed and it's built up. So that's it that I have for all of us today, um, about identity, gender and politics in the country.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an excellent plan and detailed views on gender identity and
Oh,
politics. You
thank you.
are really remarkable in your expressions and opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much.
ma'am. So, Madhu, would you like to share your opinion about the our theme?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so good evening, Dr. Khalid, Dr. Bansal, and everyone on board. Yeah, so I feel that that has been a very comprehensive lecture with a special focus on India. Like my research area being more on party politics, psephology, and voting behavior, I feel that there are three issues that we need to consider given how the contemporary political landscape in India is evolving. First, we need to understand that gender isn't just restricted to the kind of political discourse we are creating, but this is by and large also creeping into the public policy making discourse of the country. Because if we look at various states, be it West Bengal, be it Uttar Pradesh, be it Madhya Pradesh, there are specific schemes targeting specific genders that governments are coming up. Of course, there are voting politics here. If we look at West Bengal, for instance, my state, we see that in the last assembly elections of 2021, the ruling Trinamool Congress, which has Mamata Banerjee at its helm and has several pro-women welfare schemes, has a double-digit edge over the opposition BJP in terms of voting share among the women. While in terms of men, it was just a 4% difference. So a near double-digit difference does show that these welfare schemes are indeed working. We have a similar scheme in Madhya Pradesh, the Ladli Behna Yojana, which just came up before the assembly elections in December 2023. Several other states are also doing the same. Second, as ma'am also talked about gender equality and equity. I think gender equity is somewhere also lacking in our political discourse because as we see, we have reserved 33% seats in the local self-governments long time back. Yet, have our women representatives really been that effective? Probably not, because in many cases they have continued to be mouthpieces of their male counterparts. In many cases, we see that once the male sarpanch demits office, it is his wife who takes over the role. So this is kind of a vivid reality in Indian villages. And even if we continue to reserve even 33% seats in Indian Parliament and the state legislature, it is we are yet to see how much of a real impact it makes. And this is what I think is really the difference between equality and equity in the political perspective will lie. And this also kind of determines your party loyalty. Just now I talked about schemes being targeted towards specific gender roles, gender identities, and how this has kind of affected your linkage to a certain political identity, and of course your vote for a certain political party. And the third observation that I would like to make is, of course, last ma'am spoke about the issue of transgenders and how we also need to understand that gender is also it's an intersectionality of identities. It's not just about male, female, or transgender. It's also interlinked with your caste, your race, your ethnicity, your caste. Because today maybe women from the upper caste are much well off than the people from the lower caste. Similar case would be that a Hindu woman might be in a much more advanced state than a person from a minority community. So gender and identity politics must be considered in an intersectional way rather than taking them and isolating them as watertight compartments one after the other. And in this case, we also need to understand that the gradual sense that we had that it is usually women from an elite class who are the leaders of a social movement who create and craft, I think that is gradually changing, because the nature of social movements in India, the nature of protests in India are also gradually changing. Because if we have just put our minds on the television screen, if we look up on the scenes from the Sandesh Kali movement that is coming up in West Bengal, where women have been harassed, I think it is the lower depressed classes which are raising their voices rather than an elite section in society. So these are really changing patterns of protest that we need to keep in mind while we are talking about gender, identity, politics, and party loyalty at large. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Soumyadi, for sharing your insight into the gender and politics, and especially related to party politics. It was really great to hear you every time. Now, I would like to request our audience if they have any opinion or anything they want to share. Anyone from our audience? Mm, no one. Soumya, would you like to share anything, like as you were sharing your thoughts in our message? Soumya Tiwari?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Actually, it was only when Sadaf ma'am was talking about different philosophers, where she also talked about Will Kimilika. So there was this prominent author we all are aware on, and we have studied in IR, Jane Tickner. She has talked about gender. So it is very imperative to understand how beautifully she emphasizes on the different ways in which this world economy has differentially rewarded between the two genders, that is men and women. And similarly, she's also emphasized on the repercussions and the implications in the workplace diversity, where ma'am had also talked about one of the authors which who has emphasized on that female in the organizations are only forced to work the tedious task, the paperwork. So with this, slowly and steadily, I also feel that the concept of green organizational culture, where the ethical culture fostering way for the women in gender equality is also coming in. And this is where we also want to take up to the next level when we talk about West. So we also want Asian countries to, come and foster this way out for gender identity.
Thank you, Soumya Tiwari, for sharing your views. Now, anyone else who want to share anything or any opinion?
Hi,
Hi, Tirupati.
am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Tirupati.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to share idea about the gender politics and the party perspective. Um, just I want to raise a question to the floor. Like the party called since I'm working on regional party called the Dravidian parties. So based on that, I'm just raising this question. So the party agenda is since emerging time. They they have a principle. Do I am audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. So since they're emerging, they have a one primary agenda for the women's development. So since 1967 onwards, we can see any promises their party making or any schemes they're making, creating it. It's towards women's oriented. So in this scenario, how we can see that in the gender perspective, when they are working the empowerment panchayat level, panchayat presidents are today. So there is there is a case. Many panchayat leaders are not allowing to act as panchayat leader because their husbands are taking advantage on them, and they are, so there is.
Thank you, Tirupati. Although your voice was breaking, but whatever we hear, it was really good. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Anyone else who like to comment on the view shared by Dr. Sadav, Soumya Deep, or Soumya? Okay. No. So I guess the views were very informative and clear. So everyone got a very clear views what they were talking about. So now, on the behalf of Gender and Identity SRC of IAPSS, I would like to conclude today's panel discussion. Okay, Soumyadeep has raised his hand. Okay, Soumyadeep, go ahead.
And also, just a point came to my mind about the LGBTQ and gender mainstreaming that we talked about and ma'am discussed in terms of a lecture, is that we also need to understand that the political parties, except the feminist parties, the other political parties are not very gender sensitive as far as we take the scenario to be in case of India. So if we are really talk
Absolutely.
about, yeah, so
Absolutely,
if we,
Swamadip. I just wanted to add this when I was going through the transgender issue that you see in the we hardly see people from the transgender community to be a part of the politics in our any state party, regional party, national level party you see, none of them are so welcoming and accept. That acceptance is not even in the educational institutions today, right? They are
Uh,
not even.
I I think that the educational institutions are still somewhat doing a better job than political parties. That's because
Yes,
I think somewhere,
compared to
yeah,
that.
yeah, because somewhere, if you look at the very definition of a political party, it's a collective of people who are aiming for political power, and therefore you
Yes,
cannot really aim to antagonize a mass majority of the population which holds a very concrete view, and that
view.
is not really very electorally beneficial as well. You must understand that in the 1950s and 60s, political parties were really not even interested about women voters, but since the 90s, since women activism started, they started taking an interest in the view of the women voters, and that is why today we see them actively pursuing women voters, taking up policies that really matter to them. That is exactly the electoral calculus which goes on behind the functioning of a political party, and really they have not much to gain from the transgenders as we look at it today. And therefore we also need to understand that this project of sensitization, I think Dr. Meenakshi Bansal was speaking about it on the 24th when we had a workshop in our college at St. Xavier's, and being the chief convener, I had the honor of inviting her and I have to make an academic collaboration when we were speaking about it. So we really need to understand what is the role of the civil society, going beyond the political parties. What is the role of civil society, NGOs, and other organizations in ensuring the sensitization? I think they have, mm, I think they have they have a higher stake in ensuring this kind of mainstreaming and sensitization than the political parties really have, because at the end they are all, after all, a machinery to gain political power. And like we talked about, even the changing nature of protests in India, like not just in India, I think even in South Asian countries, be it in Pakistan, Bangladesh, even people from the margins are speaking up. In the recent case of the Balochistan movement, or even in Afghanistan, where women have been severely suppressed, I do think that it was the margins which erupted first rather than those in the privileged classes. So these are things that we really need to take in mind while we are attempting any discussion or further research on gender and identity politics. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Soumyadeep. There is one question for Dr. Khalid, from Erin. She's asking, what steps do you think should be taken to enhance and enrich the discussion on transgender rights in political parties?
As to what the Soumyadeep has already discussed, ma'am, we need to focus on the sensitization part. We need to understand. Soumyadeep has highlighted this very beautifully in terms of transgender. That not just we need to have that welcoming attitude, because if you read sociology, family is seen as to be the first institution, and then and there, family as an institution denies your sexual orientation. When the family denies, again suppression happens, and that's how you keep on, your whole life is under denial, whether you are a transgender or not, or even if you are, you feel that, but people are not again giving you recognition and respect out of that. So that sensitization has to be from the family till the institution you are a part of. That is lacking. We need such programs where we make people aware of that this normalization of accepting them in the community is very, very important. And for that, see, any program, any policy, or reaching out people to a larger level, being again a scholar, I will never call myself as to be a teacher. I always consider myself as to be a scholar. So being a scholar of both administration and politics, we need authority for everything. When authority is there, when the state is involved in anything, it's very pressing for the people to accept it. You as a single individual surely have the potential and can make difference, but at the same time, if it comes from the authority, if it comes from the state, if the state is welcoming, the political parties are welcoming such things on a national level, it obviously becomes, people accept it. The people look into it, that yes, we can accept this thing which is happening, right? So that sensitization is very important. Programs, policies at the local level, again, local self government. Soumya Deep has, I think, pointed out a very good thing, that we do have 33% of the reservation for women from a way back long, since 1990 to 1993. But do we actually see the females or the males actually performing that, actually doing it, actually accepting it, that fairness needs to be there? So that thing, I think all these things can be solutions at the ground level, local level, state, national level, political level, as well as educational institutions must also accept these, though they are obviously doing well, but we still need to have a welcoming approach to that.
There is one more question from Sanmitra ma'am.
Mm.
She's asking, how are you looking the perspective of Dalit feminist with gender equality?
Very interesting question. Uh, who is this person? The name of the person is Sangamitra Malik, right? Very, very interesting. Now, Sangamitra, you can take the same answer as to be the solution for the transgender. I'm certainly not, I'm just trying to build up a synergy. You see, again, sensitivity or sensitization of accepting female Dalit, violence based against them, right? How you see a female, a Dalit female, do you actually talk about their equality, their empowerment, right? uh, also their representation again at the national level, at the state level, their uh, uh, welcoming attitude of the dominant group of people for them at the educational level, corporate level. Are you actually looking into that? Where are the programs of the state again, where you can make a difference for them? And difference, again, difference has to be at a very large level. There has to be a transformation. Your approach has to transform the whole process that we have been following since long. So learning, unlearning, relearning sort of approach has to be there, right? So we are not doing that. We are just improvising the policies that we have, just making small changes into it, and then moving ahead with that, and then we shout all the whole day that humne ye kiya, humne ye kiya, right? But you see, you have to understand such things. I can again see for Dalit women, gender and caste are double-edged sword. Absolutely, Sangamitra. Absolutely. I completely agree to this. Being marginalized, Dalit women, in terms of caste, in terms of, that is why, lot of Dalit feminist writers, you see, we have to welcome their, it becomes a responsibility at the publishing world also, to, publish them, to welcome them. Not just in, I won't say that it's just JNU who is very open in that, but there are many reputed institutions, premier institutions, where you have quotas, where you have reservations for them. But yes, we need to work even harder, because we do have reservations in the country from so long. But are we actually coming out of that? Are we actually looking at the changes? Can we see the changes actually? That fairness, gender equity, is it there in our attitude? So we need to, completely transform all the policies and the programs. We have to really have a very different approach and aspect, cutting edge, that you are talking about, right? That has to be there. Yes, yes, it's absolutely doubled the marginalized community, that you see, workplace, household, uh, political participation, lot of things we have to see whether the Dalit females have participation or not. We need to build up their confidence. That confidence needs to be built up. That training program needs to come up, and you don't see that at the local level at all. You, at the local level, you still see the kind of discriminations they are going through, right? Violence they are victims of, right? So we need to focus, we need to address that. We're very those are very peculiar as well as very minor issues that we neglect, but we need to address them first. That is what I feel. Absolutely, Sangamitra. I am absolutely agreeing to what you are saying. That is why I have come up with lot of solutions that we can have. See, we as academicians are not do not have a very welcoming attitude. We as academicians do not want to contribute directly, or want. There is this lack of synergy between the academics and the politics. There is always this, and there's no intersectionality. There's always this anti attitude which we have, right? Because we see, or we go through some sort of policies that we look into, and as academicians start criticizing it, right? Now criticism is not a problem, but just criticizing it, and there is no platform where you can bring a solution or suggest a solution to the government, because you are an academician, you are an expert in that, right? That gap is still there. See, we are filling the gaps between the industry and the academia, right? We are doing that. We do have placements within the campus. We call corporate peoples to come in, and then these industrialists come, they pick up students, and that's how we all the time say that we are bridging the gap between the industry and the academia. But are we actually bridging the gap between the academia and the politics? Academia and the administration? Do these policymakers, after proposing we are aware of the policies while it has already been proposed and framed? Half of it is already framed, then we are aware of it. So as academicians, we as academicians and experts in politics and in administrations, do we do people from the government take our solutions, take our suggestions for bringing a change or for putting any solutions to any problems? That gap is not filled up. We need to find a platform where we are directly connected to the government for giving solutions. Criticism is not a problem. You criticize, though criticisms are not very welcoming when it comes on to politics. But then that is how you can think of change. Think of a transformation that I'm talking about. Change is something uh, which is a very contracted sense. I am talking about a very extracted sense of, very bigger sense of bringing a transformation in the policies, rather than just keep on improvising it again and again.
Thank you, ma'am. Like, now we are ending our today's panel discussion. And in the end, on the behalf of Gender and Identity SRC, I really wanted to extend my sincere gratitude to Dr. Sadaf ma'am for accepting our invitation and being a guest speaker in our today panel discussion. Like, your
Thank
insight,
you.
expertise really added tremendous depth and perspective to the conversation. We are truly grateful for your willingness to share your knowledge with us. Plus, I would also like to express my appreciation to our active audience. Okay, so I think we are not about to end. Soumya Tiwari has raised her hand. Soumya, go ahead.
Ma'am, I just wanted to ask ma'am if she could share some of her papers so that I can just read it, because she shared very insightful and enriching details about those papers. So will it be possible for you to share some of your papers, ma'am?
I have the complete folder already ready with me, with the PPTs, the video, my own paper, everything that I have reviewed, all the books that I've gone through. I'll share it with Meenakshi ma'am, and I'm sure she'll be sharing with all of you through mails.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so finally, thank you once again for your invaluable contribution to our event, ma'am. We really look forward to the possibility of collaborating with you again in the future. Thank you
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
so much, ma'am, and thank you to our beautiful audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.